Good morning, everyone. My name's Thomas Donahue, and this is the Driver's Apex. If you're tuning in for the first time, I create BMW E30 content, how-tos, driving videos, detailing videos, those types of things. So if you like that kind of content, hit that subscribe button. Today, on my E30, we're going to work on adjusting valves. A lot of you don't know how to adjust valves. I didn't really know how to adjust valves. I found it really intimidating. So I want to walk everyone through how to adjust your valves so that you have the confidence to adjust the valves on your own. So hang tight and I'll show you how it's done. All right, so let's show you what we're working with. We've got the GoPro in the background. Of course, we've got the M20. Let me show you the tools that I'm working with today. So for the E30, we've got our feeler gauge. And then what I use, because I don't have a proper tool, is I just have like a little Allen wrench here. And then the feeler gauge, it's a 0.010. It might be a little difficult. There it is, 0.010. There we go, perfect, right there. So that's what we're gonna feel. So I'm gonna tell you in a second how it's done, which kind of, the feel that you're looking for. That's probably the hardest part when trying to do a valve adjustment video, is to tell someone how to feel the valves. And then before we move any further, this is what I like to do. I like to label the piston numbers in order, and then I've got the intake side and the exhaust side. So I've already adjusted the valves. When I first started the valves, every single valve was so loose that you could put the feeler gauge and just move it in and out without any resistance. The key to doing a valve adjustment is to feel resistance. So let me walk you through that process. So the first thing that you want to do is, naturally, you're going to want to move the valve cover. In my case, when we put everything back together, we're going to use an anaerobic sealant on both sides of the valve cover gasket, because a lot of us struggle with leaks right in here. And then of course those leaks go straight into the spark plug wells. That's really frustrating. You're going to want also, in this particular case, I think I'm using a 22mm wrench. And in my case, because I'm running an electric fan, you can't see it, but it's right over here. We'll pan out in a minute. But I'm able to slip the 22mm wrench between the electric fan to get down to the crank bolt. So we'll get to that in a second. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to raise these rockers here so that the lobe on the cam is pointed in the correct directions. What I'm going to do is I'll pan in a second and I'll show you exactly what we're looking for. And of course, in this video, I think what I'm going to do is I'll put up a video or a photo, and I'll show you in that photo kind of that teardrop look. But in that teardrop, we want the bottom part of that teardrop to go to the bottom. That's how we know that there's no pressure on the valve spring. And at that point, we can slide in our feeler gauge. So let me show you how to do that. So let's imagine the camshaft, right? So in this particular case, on the single overhead cam engine, let's assume that the cam profile looks like this, right? So as the cam rotates, right, we wouldn't want to adjust the valve this way. That's wrong, right? If we go to adjust it this way, there's way too much pressure. You're not going to be able to slide the valve feeler gauge under here. So what you need to do is rotate the crank bolt, and you're going to continue rotating the crank bolt, right, until we get this. And at this point, we can slide in that valve adjustment tool, the feeler gauge, and then there we can get the proper adjustment for this particular car, 0.010. Once you're able to slide it in, and I don't mean that it just slides in, it's got to slide in and then it's got to have resistance. Now, if you can't get it in at all and you're pushing as hard as you can and it's bending the tool, it's too tight. If you slide it in and it's super slippery and there's no resistance at all, it's too loose. We're looking for that perfect porridge kind of temperature, right? This Goldilocks temperature. So we slide in the valve adjustment tool, we push it in, there's a little resistance, and we're able to go back and forth, and it's got a grittiness feeling to it. You could feel that there's drag. It really needs to have drag. So as long as there's drag, and you're able to do that on every single cam profile, right, or the tip of the lobe itself is in the downward, the ear is downward, then you're able to adjust every valve yourself. So give it a try. So if we look down here, you can see the closed end of the wrench. it's right there. Actually, there we go, right there. So it's right there. It's going right down to the crank hub bolt. So what I do is I turn that crank hub bolt until, let's see if we can find a cam profile, a cam lobe. So for example, I think this one here, there's no tension here. Here's a good example. Let's zoom in and I'll show you what I mean. So that's a perfect example right there. We'll put this in frame right there, that one there. That needs to continue rotating until that bottom, that teardrop part of the lobe is facing down. So if we look at this one right there, that one is facing down. See that one right there? We want it to go in the opposite direction, so that needs to flip around the other way. So you're gonna rotate the cam until that goes to the bottom. Once that goes to the bottom, then you know there's no pressure on the spring, right there. And then what we can do is loosen the 10 mil. Then right there, we could put our Allen wrench in there, and that's how we'll loosen or tighten the tension on the valve spring so that we could put the valve feeler gauge in there. So that's what I'm gonna show you how to do. All right, so let's show everybody. So I've got the 10, I've got my feeler gauge, and I've got my little Allen wrench. So what I like to do, let's find somewhere to put this, is I like to come in here. So we know we're looking for top dead center, essentially is what we're looking for. Now I've already adjusted these valves. So what you're gonna do is you're just gonna go in at the bottom here. I don't like working with gloves, but you have to work with gloves when you are adjusting that wrench down there. So I don't know if you can come in closer. Let's see if everyone can hear. There's like a little tension there. Like, so if I push, it's not sliding, but with just a little extra force, it slides. So let's show you. Let's see if they can see kind of the striation marks on there. It's going to kind of leave striation marks. If you're using a new feeler gauge, it's going to kind of leave. Let's see here. Yeah, there we go. It's hard to show on the camera, isn't it? There we go. Yeah. All right, you kind of get the gist there. So let's do this. So let's slide that back in, and I'll show you what a misadjusted valve looks like. And of course, just be careful here. That you don't damage the surface of the head. And then all that construction traffic sounds. So this here, see how that moves up and down? So that's loosening and tightening the valve adjustment. So let's go ahead and just put in the valve feeler gauge. I just had it, didn't I? Maybe I put it in my pocket. It's difficult when there's like a camera staring at you. Oh, here it is. Silver car and a silver feeler gauge, right? Okay, so see how like easy, like it just slides in and out now. So when I first started working on the valves on this car, this is what the feeler gauge was doing. It shouldn't move that freely. So what we like to do is put our feeler gauge in there. Now see, if I just push it all the way down like this, now I can't even slide it out. So we want to adjust it so that we can slide. See, now it's too tight. So what I like to do is just allow a little tension. So if you have a proper valve adjustment tool, it's curved in such a way that if you put it in there and you just let it hang, it'll provide enough tension on the valve so that you can go ahead and tighten it. So now all we want to do, now remember, we're working on the exhaust side, so if this one's top dead center on the exhaust side, most likely there's another valve. See how now we can slide it in and out? Now, if you can't move it at all, it's too tight. All right, so that valve is adjusted. Let's make sure that it's fully tightened. And then if we're looking right here, I don't know if you can see how that's moon-shaped. Hit it from the other side. Yeah, right there. Make sure that that's fully seated against the rocker. If it's not and it's twisted, you're gonna go to start the car and you're gonna get a horrible ticking sound. Ask me how I know that, because I've done it. So you're gonna get a horrible valve tick. It's gonna be out of adjustment because it's gonna be too loose. So make sure that these are fully seated. It's kind of half moon shaped right here, and it'll fit against the rocker arm. So we just finished piston 4. So now we're gonna go to 1, 2, 3. Now we're going to piston 6 here. So we did exhaust side of piston 4. We also know at this point that piston 6, the cam is set at top dead center on this side. And I've already put in the feeler gauge to show you that we have a similar resistance. That one's slightly looser potentially than this one. There's a mosquito flying around me. They're pretty close. So we want to make sure that that feel is the same. So I haven't been able to figure this out on my own without the support of a master tech. And the master tech and I continue to practice this on the last project car that I restored. And the best way that I can describe it, it's like dragging the valve adjustment tool like through sandpaper. It's got like a sandpaper, there's a little lubeness to it, like a little bit of greasiness to it, but it's like there's a little sandpaperness to it. So this one's already adjusted. So really what you need to do is, now that this one and this one are done, is you would put a mark on your piece of paper and you would indicate that you did piston 4, exhaust side, intake side, piston 6, and then from there, what we would come in and do, let's swap sides, go to the front of the car, and then I want you to come down here, right, is we've got our open-ended wrench, and I'm wearing a glove because it hurts, and all we're gonna do is we're gonna rotate. You can do this from under the car, but I also have a shield underneath the car that makes it a little difficult to get to. But all you're gonna do is continue rotating. You're gonna continue rotating, and as you rotate, you're gonna see that the cam begins to change. And what you're gonna look for again is that tear shapedness. It's kind of like the heart, right? So you've got the thicker end and then the narrow end. The narrow end is gonna face to the bottom, right? So the ears of the cam are gonna face down. And if they're facing down, then you can come in here and adjust each valve as necessary. So that's really, I think, in a quick nutshell, how you adjust a valve. But I think what I'll do is, in this video, is show some photos of what the cam profile should look like so that you can adjust the valves yourself. You can do this. All you need is your 10 mil. If you don't have a valve adjustment tool, an Allen wrench, or a weighted 2.5 millimeter, in this case, a 2.5 millimeter hex head tool. And all you're gonna do is take your time, and you want the same feel for every single one of these. And if you don't get it right the first time, that's okay. Take the valve cover off and do it again. All right, so all these are adjusted. I believe in you. I know that you can do it. That's just not the counselor part of me. I do actually believe that you can do it. I had a lot of people believe in me. So before you put the valve cover gasket and stuff back in, let's zoom in a little bit. This is from the old valve cover gasket. All of that's got to be cleaned. These rocker shaft plugs, those little areas need to be cleaned. They can be kind of a pain to clean over here, but all this has to be perfectly clean. And before you're done, make sure that every one of these, so I've gone through this twice, make sure that you go through it once, and then in my case, and probably in your case as you continue to learn, go through it a second time, and then keep tabs of everything. That way you know that one isn't out of adjustment relative to the other. All right, so I hope that explanation of how to adjust the valves, especially with that belt, I think it might have been a power steering belt or something like that, but I hope that made sense on the teardrop part, and then trying to explain the best of my ability without you being here, and I wish you were here, to really understand like how that feeler gauge should feel. I'm also working on, I just cleaned up the top of the cylinder head, all the rocker shaft plugs, stuff like that. I'm also going to do a little micro video, mini video, something like that on how to adjust the valve cover gasket. Not how to adjust the valve cover gasket, how to install the valve cover gasket. I'm going to use an anaerobic sealant on both sides. You'll use the right stuff, that black right stuff on the rocker shaft plugs, and on top of the rocker shaft plugs when you install the valve cover gasket, but don't use the right stuff on the entire valve cover gasket, especially the part that mates to the cylinder head. You will have a nightmare of a mess to clean. And then of course, if you put it on the other side, that's going to be even messier. So I hope you liked this video. If you did, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And as always, drop those comments. I really enjoy those comments.